So when we moved here from Las Vegas, anybody ever been to Vegas? I won't tell, it's okay. Yeah? So we moved there from Las Vegas in October, and it's funny because we moved into an Alameda. Anybody know what Alameda is at? So not our kind of community, it's older. There's nothing wrong with older people. I'm just saying it just wasn't our community, but we lived there for a little bit. The speed limit is 25 miles an hour, okay? I couldn't do that. We eventually moved out, but we moved to Alameda, and we were renting a house, and literally got there, everything was furnished already. So the carpet was there's a rug there's TVs, there's 3 bedrooms, there's bedding in the bedroom, everything was already furnished. There was coffee table, lamps, all of it, refrigerator, all the essential things, right, to live in a house. Everything that was there for us to move in. And so we just kind of brought all of our clothes and our luggage and kind of just unloaded everything. And this is really nice. Just relaxed, just enjoyed it. A couple months go by, and I'm noticing that there is a leak in our bathtub there's a knob. So there's a shower head, there's the knob, and then the knob, you could turn it on and off, but it also use it to go from hot to cold. And so I see there's a leak from the knob, and I'm like, it's a perfect house, it's great, I love it, it's awesome. But then weeks go by, months go by, and I noticed that this knob started to go from not just a drip of water, but it started to leak. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's leaking. I'm from Vegas, okay? I'm a city boy. I don't know how to fix any of that stuff, okay? So there's a guy that I met who lived below us. His name is James. James is from Kentucky, okay? Somebody say Kentucky, okay? So never been before, and James he told me, hey, man, if you need anything in the house to get fixed, hey, I'm your guy. I'm like, awesome, good to know. Note to self, James is downstairs if we need anything. So this leak is just getting worse and worse and worse, and so I'm not going to touch it, no way. And so I go downstairs, and I knock at James's door. I say, hey, James, I have an issue. You told me that you would be able to help us with anything in the house, so could you come upstairs? There's a leak from the knob. And so James says, okay, I'll come upstairs. So he comes upstairs, and I bring him inside, and he brings us this rectangular box. I've never seen it before. It's a toolbox, I think. And so he brings it upstairs, and he sets it down. He starts to open it up, and I'm like, okay. He's taking some stuff out. He starts to take out some tools. I don't know what they are. And so he starts to fix the knob a little bit. And so James is kind of fixing the knob. I'm kind of just standing there watching him do it. And my wife's in the kitchen, and she's, I think, cooking or doing something that women are supposed to do. I'm kidding. Somebody in the South told me that. I just wanted to say it again. I love the South, so please don't do it. I love the South. All my best friends are from the South because they make the best food. Just awesome, okay? There's just a lot of plants. I love people more than plants, but it's great. So James is upstairs. He's helping us fix the stuff, and I'm like, okay, he's fixing it. He's going to take care of it. The situation is going to be resolved. And eventually, he's cranking the knob, and I'm thinking it's going to come off. That's what he's going to do, right? Some of you probably know where I'm going with this. And so he's cranking the knob, and eventually what happens is the knob just shoots off, and water is coming out. And it's literally hitting the back of the shower. It's coming out at a rapid speed. I'm sitting there what just happened, James? And he's African American. I knew I shouldn't have trusted him. And so the knob is shooting off. The water's hitting the back of the tub. I'm like, oh my gosh. My wife kind of overhears a little bit. I'm like, hey, it's fine. We'll take it. And water's shooting out. Water is kind of filling up into the tub. And so what happens is that the knob, and there's I don't know what you call I don't know what it's called, but the knob and some other pieces were inside of the tub. And so I get inside the shower, inside the tub, trying to find where the knob and the piece, because the water's shooting out. It's everywhere. I can't see. I'm trying to find the knob to try to put it back on and give it to James. And we can't find it. And I'm just in there, and the water is filling up. It's rising. And eventually, the water starts to rise so much, I'm freaking out. So I go downstairs, I get this huge bucket, and I'm running upstairs. I get inside the tub, and I'm draining water and trying to put it into the sink and grabbing water and putting it into the toilet, and it's just not putting a dent in the thing, and it's just flowing. And eventually the water starts to spill outside of the bathtub. This is not my house. Everything it's about to cost me everything. And the water is spilling up into the bathroom, and my wife comes in. I'm like, it's fine, we're going to take care of it, I promise. And I'm freaking out because I'm thinking this is not my house, and I'm about to lose everything. literally. And the narrative that we're going to get in today, David tries to do it himself. David finds himself in a situation, in a circumstance, that it's not good, and he didn't put himself there, granted, but he gets himself in a situation that he tries to DIY. He tries to do it himself. He tries to do it himself. He tries to fix the situation himself. And sometimes you and I are in those same situations. When we try to fix the issue, fix the problem, fix the situation, fix the circumstance ourselves without any experts' help or advice. And we try to DIY and do it yourself. And we do that in a place, oftentimes, when we're abandoned, angry, and afraid. As a matter of fact, what we're going to learn today is that, on the next slide, please. The ways of God are most unappealing and seemingly irrelevant when we're angry, isolated, and afraid. The ways of God, however you define that for yourself, following God, following Jesus, following God, the ways of God, they're most unappealing and seemingly irrelevant. Like, why would I do that? Why would I follow this way? They're most unappealing and irrelevant when we are angry, isolated, and afraid. And David finds himself in a situation where he's angry, he feels abandoned, he's isolated, and he's about to make a decision, and he's going to try to fix it himself. So, here's the story, okay? So David, he's the most famous person in all of Israel, of all of the nation of Israel. He just conquered Goliath. There are songs being written about David. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. There's hip-hop songs being written about David. And so David's this most famous warrior in all of the nation of Israel. And he's kind of on this rise. He's in his prime. He's Steph Curry at this moment. He's in his prime. And man, everybody loves David. And so King Saul, who's the first king of Israel at the time, he sees that David is becoming so popular and so well-known, so prominent. So he tries to control David. So what he does is tries to offer his daughter in a hand of marriage to David. David refuses it, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, that guy is so humble. He's amazing. He's just who would do that? Like, David's just an awesome guy. And so Saul, it's like, man, I got to try to figure out how to control this kid. And so what happens is eventually David falls in love with one of Saul's other daughters. Her name is Michal, okay? And he becomes really good friends with not just Michal, but her brother. Her name is Jonathan. We're going to call him John for short. And so he becomes good friends with John. He's married to Saul's other daughter, Michal, and now he's in the family. But Saul realizes that this guy is so popular, so prominent, I think I made a mistake to try to bring him into my family. And so what he did was essentially, he tries to send him off to these impossible missions so that David could be taken care of in war by the Philistines. And so David goes to war, Saul hoping that the war would take care of David. And then so David's in war. He's going on these impossible missions. And so he's missing out on dinner. He's missing out on this family gatherings. And so Saul would say, hey, where's David? I haven't seen him lately. Where's he at? And Michal, his wife, would cover for him. And Jonathan was like, oh, he's on some impossible mission. He won't make it to dinner. And so eventually what happens is that Saul is getting furious. He's getting angry. And one night at dinner, it all culminates. And Saul is furious. He's ticked. David hasn't been at dinner, and he shows up, and he calls the family dinner. Everybody's there. The whole family's there. Everyone's there except for David. And Jonathan covers for him again. And this is where we pick it up. This is what the verse says. Saul is angry. The whole family's there. It says this. Saul's anger flared up. Everybody's at dinner. And he said to Jonathan, he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, you. It's kind of strong. He said, go back. He said, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, you. When I read the verse, I'm thinking, I hope that woman isn't sitting at the table. And he says, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, you. Next verse, he says, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse all All of you here sitting at the table, you've all taken side with this shepherd boy, David, over me, King Saul. He says, don't I know that the side of the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of, is she in here? Is she in here? The shame of the mother who bore you? He just could not leave her out of the situation. I think they're having some marriage issues. But then again, in that day, everybody was having marriage issues because in that day, everybody had a favorite wife. You don't want to live in a culture where everybody is a favorite wife. Okay, but that's another story for another time. He says, as long as the son of Jesse, and here's the real issue, guys. This is the real issue. He says, as long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. You see, because Saul was the first king of Israel, and he saw his son John, as the next line in the throne. He was going to be the one to take over the seven kingdoms. Well, that's another story. And he says, you sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame. And now David finds himself in a situation where he's abandoned, he's angry, and he's afraid. And Jonathan goes to David and says, David, look, man, it's bad. Like, hey, you need to leave the town. In fact, it's worse than that. You need to leave the country. And so David now is 22 years old. And he's abandoned, and he's angry, and he's afraid. And he's about to make a decision that's going to taint and be a part of his story for the rest of his life. And we're going to get into the story. You're going to see, like, what David, I mean, we have the 30,000-foot view. We could look at David and David. Why would you do that? Why would you go there? Why would you run away? Why would you make that decision, right? We have the 30,000-foot view that we can do that. But I'm sure that there's people, friends and family, that are looking at us and probably say the same thing about us. Why would she do that? Why would she send that text message? Why would you? But let's be honest, though, right? Like, now that we have time and context with our stories, we can look back at our own stories and look at ourselves as like, why did I do that? Why did I go there? Why did I make that decision? Why did I leave home? Why did I text her back? Why did I swipe? Like, and oftentimes we make those decisions when in a place when we're angry and we're abandoned or isolated or we're afraid. And it's going to be a part of our story for the rest of our lives. So, back to the story. This is what happens next. David went to to Ahimelech the priest. So let me explain this, okay? So Nob is kind of a city or a city in the region of Israel. Israel at the time doesn't have a capital city. So at Nob, there's the Ark of the Covenant, which is like the 10 Commandments, how they worship and honor God. So that's in the place of Nob right now, the city of Nob. And so David goes to Nob because he knows that the safest place to go is where the Ark of the Covenant is, where the 10 Commandments are. And so David goes to the city of Nob, where he finds Ahimelech the priest there along with him. And so David goes to Nob and he sees Ahimelech the priest, and it says, Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, why are you alone? And why is no one with you? You see, wherever David went, you heard him coming. Wherever he went, because David traveled with literally thousands of people, thousands of men, thousands of warriors. When David went somewhere, people were with him. People were going with him. And so wherever David went, you heard him coming. And so when he shows up at Ahimelech's place, and Ahimelech's like, I didn't hear you coming. And so he trembles when he met him. He says, why are you alone? Why is no one with you? And David answers Ahimelech the priest, and he lies. Okay, this is important because David doesn't lie. David is a good Jewish young man, and he loves God, and he writes about God. He loves people. He doesn't lie. And so this is outside of David's character. David doesn't do that, but David lies. And he answers Ahimelech the priest. He said, the king sent me on a mission and said to me, no one is to know anything about the mission that I am sending you on. So he lies. And he says, as for my men, I've told them to meet me at a certain place. Nice, David. Like, you could have come up with a better lie. A certain place. And so he doesn't have any men. He's running away from King Saul because he's afraid, he's abandoned, he feels isolated. And so he shows up to this Ahimelech's house, and Ahimelech's like, David's a little disheveled, he's a little frantic, and he shows up, he's like, this is not the David that I know. And he says, as for my men, I've told them at a certain place. And so he's lying to cover for himself. Because he's afraid if he tells Ahimelech the truth, he's afraid that if he tells him the truth, that he won't help him. He won't offer a hand of help. And so he lies. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find. So he's asking he shows up, he's frantic, he's a little isolated. He says, but the priest answered David, I don't have any ordinary bread here on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread that I have here. So, in other words, what he's saying is like, so this is a little strange for us because we don't do this in our culture. But for them, how they would honor God is that the priest would break fresh bread and would offer it on the altar as a sacrifice to honor God. Right? It's just strange for us, but that's what they did. And so, lo and behold, they would leave it overnight, and they would show up the next morning, and the bread was still there because God hadn't eaten it. I wonder how many times they have to do that to figure that out, you know? And so they showed up, and the bread was still there. And so the priest would keep it, and they would eat it. And so David doesn't have any food, doesn't have any water, doesn't have any bread, and so he shows up, he says, hey, I'm hungry. And so the priest says, look, David, we don't have any normal food here because we're like the king's high priest. But we have this like consecrated bread. You can have it. And so David takes the bread. And now this is really important. Go back, please. This is really important. Because David has not only lied about why he's here, but he also lied to be fed. And if you know anything about David, this is not the David that we saw a couple of pages ago. This is not the David that we have grown to love and to admire. This is not that David. This is not the version of David. He's acting out of character. This isn't David. And so he lies to be here, but he lies to be fed. And the next verse, the king says this. David asked Ahimelech, don't you have a sword spared here? Okay, David. Ahimelech's like, okay, he gets a big clue at this point. He's like, okay, David, you're the most famous warrior in all of the nation. You're literally the king's son-in-law, and he sent you on a secret mission, and you don't have any food, any water. Your men are hiding in some secret place, and you don't even have a weapon? And this lie that David told is going to cost, not David, it's going to cost Ahimelech and their family their entire lives. And in this moment, it's about to get really intense and really dramatic. And I'm gonna hope that this is where you find yourself in this story. I'm gonna hope that God speaks to you in this moment. He says, do you have a sword or a spear here by chance? He says, I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon because the king's mission was so urgent. So David shows up. He's frantic. He doesn't have a sword. He doesn't have a weapon. And now what's about to happen is it's about to get really dramatic. So he's looking for a sword. He's looking for a weapon. He's looking for a spear. And this is what happens next. He says, the priest replied, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. David, the only weapon that we have on hand, David, the only thing that we have on hand is the sword that you used to kill Goliath 7 years ago. That sword that you have here, hey, that's the only thing that we have on hand. And could you just imagine in this moment when the priest brings out this weapon that David used to kill Goliath, to cut off his head? And what happened is that David took that same sword and he gave it to the high priest as a souvenir. I mean, come on, who wouldn't? And he gives it to him as a souvenir, and that sword comes out, and David's looking at the sword. I mean, he's transported back into time, into this event that literally kind of catapulted him to make him who he is today. And the sword comes out, and could you just imagine what's happening to David? That sword comes out, and he's all of a sudden taken back to that afternoon when he's kind of wandering as a little shepherd boy, 14 years old. And he's standing there before Goliath, and there's literally thousands of men of both sides of the valley. And he sees Goliath, and he looks at Goliath in the eyes and says, look, Goliath, this day I will cut off your head, and I'll feed it to the carcass of the Philistines. And will everybody know, this is what the verse says, he says, will everybody know that today, David, this day, all those gathered here will know that this is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give it all of you into our hands. Could you just imagine what happened to that David? That courageous, brave-hearted, God-fearing shepherd boy David. What happened to that version of David? What happened to the boy that said, for I will fear no evil, for you are with me? What happened to that David? I'll tell you what happened to that David. Abandonment, anger, fear, loneliness. You see, these three giants will cause us to overstep the moral and ethical and boundaries that we set up for ourselves. These three giants will cause us to wreak havoc on decisions and situations in our life that we will never, ever have done. These three giants will cause us to forget the defeated giants in our past. And David takes the sword. And this is what happens next. It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, you can take it, the priest says. There's no sword here but that one. And David is literally about to take matters into his own hands. He's about to try to do it himself. David said, there is none like it. Give it to me. And he takes it. And he takes matters into his own hands, and he tries to fix the situation himself. We see a flawed weapon, a flawed response, and in just a second, we're going to see a disastrous outcome. So, you can go back to the next slide. So David, he's alone, he's isolated, he's abandoned, he takes a sword, and he goes to a land of the Philistines. Guess who's from Philistines? That would be Goliath. He goes to Gath, which is literally the tribe that Goliath is from. He has the sword in his hand. He's standing there before the leader of the tribe of Gath, the Philistines. He's standing with a sword, and he says, look, I'm here, and I want to join your army. I want to be part of your group. I want to double tap. I want to subscribe. I want to be part of your group. It's a long story. I'm here now. I'll tell you about it later. I want to be part of this. And the leader of the Philistines looks at him and is like, "What, Dave, you're like the most famous warrior. You're holding Goliath's sword. We're not buying it. Like, no way, get out of here." And David starts to get frightened because they're not accepting him. He's even more afraid. He's more frightened. And so what he does, literally, he starts acting like a madman. Okay? He starts to scratch his nails onto wood. He starts to drool all over himself. He starts to speak like gibberish. Like the Bible's, this is all in the Bible. You should read it. It's awesome. And David's like acting like this madman all of a sudden. And he gets frightened. And so the guy looks at him and says, like, we have enough fools in our courts as it is. Get this guy out of here. And so David is frightened, and he flees, and he goes to a cave. He's living inside this cave. He's had some time to think about his situation, to think about himself, think about what's going on. He's sitting inside the cave, and he's all alone in this cave, having a pity party for himself. And he comes to his senses, and he realizes, you know what, I'm going to go back to my country. So David goes back to his country, and he finds a prophet. And this prophet, he goes to the prophet and says this, look, I've made a mess of the situation. I want to know the ways of God. I want to know the will of God. I want to follow God again. I want to do it the right way. And when he says that to the prophet, but by this time, guys, by this time, the damage is done. Because when David showed up to Ahimelech's house, there was another guy there. His name is Doeg. And he is a part of the captain of the guard of Saul's army. And he overheard the conversation between David and Ahimelech. And he got a little bit confused, but he heard enough of it to get Ahimelech in trouble. So Doeg goes to Saul. He says, Saul, I have located David. As a matter of fact, he's in the city of Nob. He's with Ahimelech. And Ahimelech, the priest, he's given David a sword. He's given him food. He's given him a shelter. He's given him provisions. He's armed your enemy, David. And Saul is furious. Saul is ticked. And so Saul sends for Ahimelech and his family and brings them to where he is. And he stands there, and Saul is upset. And this is where the story picks up right now. He says this. He says, Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me? You and the son of Jesse, you, my family, Jonathan, Michael, you've all conspired against me. The son of Jesse giving him bread and a sword and inquiring of God for him. He says, what are you talking about? This is not the first time. Saul that has rebelled against me and lies away from me as he does today. He says, look, you've rebelled against me, and my enemy's now waiting for me. And he says, next verse says, Ahimelech answered the king, who of all your servants is as loyal as David? He's like, what are you talking about? David's reputation in the community is that he's a loyal servant. He's your most loyal subject. David? He says, the king's son-in-law, a captain of the bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? You're talking about David, the David that we know and love? Was that the day plus? Was that the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant of any of his father's family. He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about, for all your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair. But the whole affair, the king said, you will surely die, Ahimelech, you and your whole family. And Saul orders his men to put the sword to Ahimelech and his family. But they wouldn't do it. He says, look. They're like, whoa, Saul, this is too far. Like, hey, we will go to the ends of the earth for you. We will conquer your enemies. We will take from those who've taken from us. But we can't do this. And so Doeg raises his hand. He says, if they won't, I will. And David puts the sword and he slaughters the priest and 85 are the high priest. Saul isn't finished. Saul sends his men back to the city of Nob, and guys, he destroys the whole city. He puts a sword to every family, to every children, to every infant, to every cattle, to every sheep, to every goat, and destroys the entire village. And very few escape, except for one little boy. He goes to David, this little boy, and he shows up to David, and he spills the whole story before David, and this is what David says. He says this, I am responsible for the death of your whole family. You see, taking matters into our own hands sometimes feels good, but it never goes well. And David is responsible for the death of a whole village because he felt that, hey, taking matters into my own hands feels good. It feels like it's the right thing to do. It feels like I should do it myself. But David is literally responsible for the death of an entire village. You see, when we're angry or feel isolated or abandoned or afraid? What often happens is that we make decisions in those moments that will forever taint and become a part of our story. But I have a couple questions for us to make this very practical for you and I as we leave the room. What is your loneliness, anger, or fear causing you to consider that you've never considered before? What is it? Is it an addiction that you put down 10 years ago? And you spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours to put away? And now you're finally considering it? You see, what happens is that when we make decisions out of fear and anger and isolation, we start to consider live options that we would never consider before. All of a sudden, things that we have put away that we've never think about, that we've never considered, they are all of a sudden live options for us to consider that we would never consider before. So what is your loneliness or anger causing you to consider that you would never consider before? Or how about this one? Who is your loneliness, anger, or fear causing you to consider that you know you shouldn't consider? Who? So-and-so made it obvious to you that they're interested in a relationship, right? They slid into your DMs. And you know you shouldn't consider a relationship. You know it's not healthy for you. You know it's not good for you, but you've considered it because it's now all of a sudden a live option because you're in a place of isolation or abandonment or you're fearful. Who? How about this one? Who, besides you, do your considerations put at risk? You see, we all know the answer to this question for you, and it's the people that you love the most. And it's the people that love you the most. So who do your considerations that are not live options for you all of a sudden that you put at risk? Who? How about this one? What advice would you give somebody who is you? What advice? What advice would you give somebody who is you in your situation, in your circumstance? What would you say to them? You see, David, we know what his advice would be, right? Not 22-year-old, but 50-year-old David, right? He's past this. He's 90,000-foot view. He's looking back at his story. We know what advice David would give. He would say this. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed. Not alcohol, not another chemical, not another pill, not another new thing to lease, not another car, not another person. No, the Lord is a refuge for the oppressed. The Lord is a place for a stronghold in times of trouble. You see, we don't understand stronghold very much, but in this time, when there was war happening, the people would leave the country, they would leave the city, and they would go to a city of refuge. They'd find stronghold in that city. But you know what would happen? They would go there and find safety and security. For us today, let me encourage you this, that look, the Lord is your refuge. The Lord is the place of stronghold that you can run to, that you can flee to, that you can find refuge, that you can find peace, that you can find contentment. The Lord is a place for you. David will go on to say, those who know your name and trust in you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. You see, David looked back at his story and he would say, look, I put refuge in taking control of my circumstance myself. I put refuge in doing it myself. But David would say, look, I was mistaken because the Lord has never forsaken me. I was the one that was forsaken. I was the one that was mistaken because the Lord has never mistaken me. Look, God will never forsake you. Maybe right now, maybe 5 minutes ago, something came to your mind that, like, man, I made a decision. I know that it's tainted my story forever. It's tainted somebody else's story forever. But I want you to believe this. Your past, Jesus, doesn't have to define you. You're not defined by your past, but by your future. And in your future is a future of hope. It's a future of love. It's a future of forgiveness. It's a future of joy because of the story of Jesus. Because 1,000 years later, one of David's most famous descendants, his name is Jesus, looked into the eyes of some overtaxed Israelites and he said to them, look, come to me, all of you that are heavy laden, that are burdened, come to me and I will give you rest. I will shoulder your burden. Take my perspective, take my worldview, take my yoke, because I will give you rest and find rest for your souls. And so maybe you're here today with a friend or a family, and maybe they brought you because you're visiting on vacation for the first time, and they come to these preaching services, and you're like, what am I doing here? And you're sitting there with your arms folded. That's okay, but I want you to encourage you this. Look, the Lord is a refuge for you. He can find peace in your soul. He's the place that we run in time of refuge. So run to him. You don't have to be defined by your past. Because of the story of Jesus, you can be defined by your future. It's a future of hope. What is a live option for you that you should not consider being a live option?